You ever have one of those mornings where a single knock rearranges your whole day? That's how it started for me. 3 sharp raps on the porch, my coffee halfway to my lips, and a woman I hadn't met standing there like she owned the air itself. Her name was Ellen Price, white blouse, clipboard, and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She said she was with the Lakeshore Community Council and they needed access for the good of everyone. I told her my property wasn't part of their domain, that my driveway ends where my deed says it ends, simple, polite, and final. She smiled wider, produced glossy flyers, and told me I was making things difficult for the community. The tiny voice in me wanted to believe we could end it with a handshake. The rest of me had already closed the gate. I grew up with fences, not the wooden kind, but the kind you keep in your chest. Lines you don't let folks cross because some things are worth protecting even if no one understands why. This cabin was my grandfather's, a rust-creased place with a porch that catches the evening like a net. A place I chose because it felt like the last stubborn piece of my family left untouched by committees and polite theft. So when Ellen stepped past the threshold and into my yard to read a clause out loud, I lost my temper in a way that sounded disappointingly like the truth. She had that practiced cadence, like a speech someone rehearsed in a mirror. "We're trying to make space for everyone," she said, tapping the clipboard like it was a gavel. "We have an approved retreat, 50 people, food trucks, music." I could see it folding chairs on my lawn, strangers trampling the path my father used to walk. I said no. She said the law would sort it. I said the law is my deed. She said she'd call. Power doesn't always arrive as a threat. Sometimes it wears a cardigan and a nameplate and expects you to step aside. The first act of this mess was stubbornness and a clipboard, and somewhere between polite letters and raised voices, Ellen decided to escalate. She left that afternoon with witnesses and a promise she'd return with assurances. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived, stamped and formal, alleging violations and fines for rules I'd never signed. I could have ignored it, burned it, laughed, but vengeance and bureaucracy needs a calm answer. So I called the county office, dug up old surveys, scanned my deed until the scanner whined, and started collecting the kind of evidence people only pull out when things get ugly. I'm not a litigator, but I learned the language of boundaries. The motion lights blinked twice like an alarmed heartbeat, and my phone vibrated with footage. A black SUV rolling down my lane, a dozen people unloading folding tables, and a canopy. They didn't bother with polite knocks. The gate wasn't latched. I slipped into my boots, grabbed a small spotlight, and walked toward the headlights. The light spilled across faces, not anonymous crowds, but neighbors I'd waved to, people who'd once mowed my lawn. There was Ellen, center stage, directing, confident as a director on opening night. I walked up with the calm someone practices when they hope reason will prevail. I called out, "This is private property. You need to leave now." Nobody laughed. One of them sneered and asked if I wanted a citation first. The footage from that night mattered because it showed things plainly. Our exchange, their hurried packing when someone realized a phone was filming, Ellen's face tightening as she barked into a walkie-talkie. I was breathing loud in the video, not from fear, but from the heat of seeing my life treated like a prop. They left before the sheriff arrived. They left because a neighbor called, and because a camera makes courage look smaller on a screen. We took the footage to a lawyer. His office smelled like old coffee and certainty. He didn't promise fireworks. He promised paperwork and consequences. The Lakeshore Council didn't have the unanimous backing Ellen claimed. There were minutes in binder spines showing dissent, votes that never mentioned my property, and an insurance rider that denied coverage for unauthorized events. Names I'd never met signed statements saying they never authorized this. Ellen tried to spin it. She erected a film crew, posted a video about reclaiming communal spaces, and called me a villain in captions that traveled faster than truth. I started getting messages supportive and venomous, and I learned another modern rule. When you stand still, narratives will try to move you. So I did something quiet. I organized my evidence, filed an injunction, and showed up with facts instead of fury. The day of the hearing felt like waiting for a summer storm. People drifted onto courthouse steps with placards and coffee, and cameras that never sleep. Ellen walked in under a small canopy of supporters, wearing the same white blouse like armor. The judge read patiently deeds, surveys, witness statements, and when the gavel came down, it felt less like triumph and more like the world agreeing with common sense. The court ordered the council to cease unauthorized use and granted a temporary injunction. Victory isn't a tidy full stop. It's a bruise that heals while you watch. Ellen's public humiliation did not make her vanish. She reorganized, whispered into other ears, and started a petition alleging exclusion. Small towns love a comeback story, and she cast herself as the martyr of community access. People took sides. Some called me selfish, some called me heroic. Most just watched and picked a bench. One night, the gate alarm screamed at 3, and my neighbor's old dog barked like it had seen ghosts. When I went outside, lantern in hand, I found a banner snagged on the maple, a smear of paint on the mailbox, and a flyer in the creek that read, "Private privilege denies all." Someone had driven down and left a theatrical calling card. Not violence, but annoying enough to make you double-check your locks. So I learned to live with the truce: the gate stays locked, the maps filed, the porch light left on longer. The council eventually issued a formal apology for unauthorized actions and added a clause requiring explicit written consent for private land events, a paper fix that smelled faintly of compromise. Ellen still attends meetings, speaks the same way, but there's a softness when she looks at me, like the woman who knocked once and found the porch already guarded. What surprised me most wasn't the letters or the lawyering. It was how small humiliations pile into bigger ones until they look like a crisis. It was how people you think you know can stand on the same dirt and tell two different truths. And it was how, when you do the quiet work of documentation, the calls, the photos, the neighbor statements, you can turn a story that favors loudness into one that favors fact. I won the paper fight, but the real work is keeping the peace without losing what made the place mine in the first place. This is mine, messy and imperfect, but mine. So what would you have done? Is community always right when it says for everyone? Or does for everyone sometimes mean for the loudest? Drop a comment and tell me where you stand. Defend the council. Defend private property. Tell me if I was too rigid or just stubborn in the right way. Share this if you've ever had to stand up for something that mattered more than convenience. And if you think the law should have the last word, tell us why. I want to hear your take.